It was about the beginning of September, 1664, that I heard that the plague had returned again in Holland, whither, they say, it had been brought, some said, from Italy, some from the Levant, among some goods which were brought home by the Turkey fleet. Others said it was brought from Candia, others from Cyprus. But it matters not from whence it came.
We had no such thing as printing newspapers in those days to spread rumours and report of such things, and to improve them by the invention of man, which I have lived to see practised since. But such things as these were gathered from the letters of merchants and others who corresponded abroad, and were handed about by word of mouth only, so things did not spread instantly over the whole nation as they do now. But it seems the government had a true account of it, and several councils were held over ways to prevent it coming over, but all was kept very private.
I feel really depressed at the idea that we are leaving Europe, because it has meant so much to me.
I feel very, very sad about it all, because you don't know which way things are going.
Hence it was that this rumour died off again, and people began to forget it as a thing we were very little concerned in and which we hoped was not true. Till the beginning of December 1664, when 2 Frenchmen died of the plague in Long Acre. In order to be certain of the truth, 2 physicians and a surgeon were ordered to go to the house, and upon finding evident tokens of the sickness upon both the bodies that were dead, gave their opinions publicly that they died of the plague.
The people show a great concern at this and begin to be alarmed all over town. And the more because in our last week in December, another man dead in our same house, on the same distemper. After that, I think it was the 12th of February, another man dead in another house, but in our same parish and our same manner. It's not as reasonable that you should trust God with the chance or risk of losing your trade, as that you should stay in some imminent point of danger and trust Him with your life.
This turned the people's eyes pretty much towards that end of the town. It began to be suspected that the plague was among the people at that end of the town, and that many had died of it, that they had taken care to keep it as much from the knowledge of the public as possible. This possessed the heads of the people very much, and few cared to go through Drury Lane, or the other streets suspected, unless they had extraordinary business that obliged them to it. From the time that the plague first began in St Giles Parish, the ordinary burials increased in number considerably.
However, the weather proving cold and the frost still continuing very severe till near the end of February, the bills decreased again and the city grew healthy, and everybody began to look upon the danger as good as over, only that the burials in St Giles still continued high. From the beginning of April especially, they stood at 25 each week, till the week from the 18th to the 25th, when there was buried in St Giles Parish 30. This alarmed us all again, and terrible apprehensions were among the people, especially the weather now being changed and growing warm, and the summer being at hand. The people still had some hopes, but they searched the houses and found that the plague was really spread every way, so it was no more to be concealed. It quickly appeared that the infection had spread itself beyond all hopes of abatement.
I lived without Aldgate, about midway between Aldgate Church and Whitechapel Bars, on the north side of the street. And as the distemper had not reached to that side of the city, our neighbourhood continued very easy. But at the other end of the town, their consternation was very great. And the richer sort of people, especially the nobility and the gentry, from the very west part of the city, thronged out of the towns with their families and servants in an unusual manner. Nothing was to be seen but wagons and carts, with goods, women, servants, children, coaches filled with people of the better sort, and horsemen attending them, and all hurrying away. Then empty wagons and carts appeared, and spare horses with servants returning or sent from countries to fetch more people.
This was a very terrible and melancholy thing to see, and it filled me with very serious thoughts of the misery that was coming upon the city and the unhappy condition of those who would be left in it. This hurry continued some weeks, all the month of May and June, because it was rumoured that an order of the government was to be issued to place turnpikes and barriers on the road to prevent people travelling, and that the towns on the road would not suffer people from London to pass for fear of bringing the infection along with them.
I now began to consider seriously with myself concerning my own case and how I should dispose of myself, that is to say, whether I should resolve to stay in London or shut my house up and flee, as many of my neighbours did. I had two important things before me. The one was my carrying on the business and shop, in which was embarked all my effects in the world, and the other was the preservation of my life, in so dismal a calamity as I saw apparently was coming upon the whole city.
My trade was a saddler. I was a single man, 'tis true, but I had a family of servants whom I kept at my business, had a house, shop and warehouse filled with goods, and, in short, to leave them all without any overseer or person fit to be trusted with them, had been to hazard not only the loss of my trade, but of my goods, and indeed of all I had in the world.
I had an elder brother at the same time in London, and not many years before come over from Portugal, and advising with him, his answer was in 3 words, "Master, save thyself." In a word, he was for my retiring into the country, as he resolved to do so himself with his family. telling me the best preparation for the plague was to run away from it.
Is it not as reasonable that you should trust God with the chance or risk of losing your trade, as that you should stay in so eminent a point of danger and trust Him with your life?
I was in no strait as a place where to go, having several friends and relations in Northamptonshire, whence our family first came from, and I had a sister in Lincolnshire, very willing to receive and entertain me.
My brother, who had already sent his wife and 2 children to Bedfordshire, and resolved to follow them, pressed my going very earnestly, and I had once resolved to comply with his desires, but at that time could get no horse, for there was hardly a horse to be bought or hired in the whole city.
Once I resolved to travel on foot with one servant and, as many did, lie at no inn, but carry a soldier's tent with us and so lie in the fields, the weather being very warm and no danger from taking cold. But then my servant, whom I'd intended to take down with me, deceived me, and, being frighted at the increase of distemper, left me. So I was put off for that time, and one way or other, I always found that to a point to go away was always crossed by some accident or another, so as to disappoint and put it off again.
It came very warmly into my mind one morning, as I was musing on this particular thing, that as nothing attended us without the direction or permission of divine power, so these disappointments must have something in them extraordinary, and I ought to consider whether it did not evidently point out to me that it was the will of heaven I should not go. It immediately followed in my thoughts that if it really was from God that I should stay, He was able effectually to preserve me in the midst of all the death and danger that would surround me, and that if I attempted to secure myself by fleeing from my habitation and acted contrary to these intimations, it was a kind of flying from God, and that He could cause His justice to overtake me when and where He saw fit.
These thoughts quite turned my resolution again. When I came to discourse with my brother, again I told him that I inclined to stay, to take my lot in that station in which God had placed me, that it seemed to be made more especially my duty on the account of what I have said. My brother, though a very religious man himself, laughed at all I had suggested about its being an intermission from heaven, and told me several stories of such foolhardy people, as he called them, as I was.
I went home that evening greatly oppressed in my mind, irresolute, not knowing what to do. I had set the evening wholly apart to consider seriously about it, and was all alone. For already people had, as it were by a general consent, taken up the custom of not going out of doors after sunset.
In the retirement of this evening, I endeavoured to resolve what was my duty to do, and I stated the arguments with which my brother had pressed me to go into the country, and I set against them the strong impressions which I had on my mind for staying.
Brother, can you let me? Should I stay or should I If I stay in town, I'll very likely be struck down. So come on and let me know. Should I stay here or should I